Señor Embajador,
Mr. Ambassador, distinguished representatives from other diplomatic missions, representatives from other relevant think tanks, I'm happy to bid you a very cordial welcome to this 11th session. We're going to be talking about Europe. Europa a debate. We're going to be addressing the issue of the economic future of the European Union. This working session is a part of a series. As you can see, this is the 11th time around that we meet. We go back to 2010, and in 2010, we began to see the triple-pronged presidencies. It behooved Spain at that point. That was the Spanish semester in, as I say, the year 2010. The Foundation Carlos de Amberes, or Charles of Antwerp, is very keen to uphold this tradition. We're happy to have you with us. It's not easy to put together groups of experts such as these, but we're always very successful, as you can see. It's snowing outside, it's cold outside. I think it would be perfectly commonsensical to not leave the house. There's a lot of gibberish being said, but as modestly and as humbly as we always like to do things here. And on this occasion, by the way, we have been helped by the Latvian presidency, the past Italian presidency, with the assistance of the Parliament, the Commission, the Real Instituto Elcano, the Center for Political Studies in Brussels, and the Association of European Journalists. As I say, then here we are. Here's our reaction, our response. You are sitting here today just as the persons who met at the Puerta del Sol did so on May 15. So, we have ahead of us 2 debate sessions, one commencing at 10:30 and finishing at noon, and the other, with a half hour in between, will bring us all the way to 2 p.m. We're going to be talking about an issue which is of the utmost importance. When we began to prepare this session, the events which have taken place had not as yet been prepared, although there were seeds of concern. But at this point, the economic scenario in Europe allows us to understand that, yes, there are uncertainties, and it has us thinking that there will be new actions and activities. And we will be needing to negotiate with new interlocutors. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us this morning. And I encourage you to pay close attention to what our speakers are going to say in these upcoming 2 sessions. I'm sure that our moderator, Cristina Manzano, I'm sure she is going to be able to keep the participants in rein in such a way as to ensure that the comments are appreciated. Now, when we organize a session of this nature, there are 2 very important points in time for the organizers. So firstly, we need to clearly define the issue at hand. We need to ensure that the contributors be of the utmost interest, which of course is all the more relevant when participants travel from abroad. Imagine, say, from New Zealand. Isn't it important if so-and-so from New Zealand is coming to us? And then what also is very important is that we make sure that the gentleman from New Zealand make sure that he speaks for the allotted time so that the next speaker can talk. So we devote time and efforts to having the gentleman from New Zealand come, and then we spend our time focusing on having the gentleman from New Zealand not talk for too long. I don't think this is going to happen today. I think that our guests, our speakers, are going to be concise, they're going to keep to the point, and they're going to be understanding and stimulating. I'm sure that they also are going to enjoy the debates that will follow. So please, ladies and gentlemen, put your cell phones on flight mode. Please focus on what we're about to do, which is absolutely essential. There was an author, I think it was Blake, who said that when information is cheap, attention is costly. Well, we're going to be hearing from persons who are going to share information that is dear and important and scarce, which is why your attention, I believe, is guaranteed beforehand. I'm going to now immediately give the floor, and I'm sorry because I did take up a little bit too much time. I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Marco Ricardo Rusconi, in charge of economic and commercial affairs from the embassy of Italy, and then immediately afterwards, Ambassador Janis Eichmanis from Latvia will address us. You have the floor, sir.
Estimado Presidente.
Dear President, Mr. Ambassador, speakers, dear friends all, ladies and gentlemen, I must begin by thanking the Foundation Carlos de Amberes or Charles of Antwerp for having organized this session, which will be addressing the issues of the past semesters. As of the signing of the Treaty of Rome in 1957, a number of years have gone by, and I would like to remind you that Spain's inclusion in the European Union was approved in 1985, another Italian presidency. So Italy definitely is a true believer in Italy. It is a place of hope for upcoming generations as defined by our Prime Minister Materazzi. In the past semester, we believe Italy has achieved a number of very important objectives, the first of which to guarantee political value to the decisions taken in May 25 last year. The designation of Jean-Claude Juncker as President of the European Commission is not the result of the acknowledgement of the results of the voting activities, which in and of itself would not have sufficed, and the party represented by Juncker would not have achieved sufficient votes. But rather it is the result of a political agreement in which, highlighting the value of popular elections, we have wanted to ensure that the deep meaning is understood of the citizens' votes. Therefore, Juncker's position goes together with a package of reforms and a political project for upcoming years. This is the first time this happens in the history of European institutions, and the Parliament becomes much closer to us than we are used to being to our national parliaments. As of the elections of May, citizens have demanded a change in the activities undertaken in Europe and in Italy. This is what we have understood is important, change in the face of challenges which are important internally and externally. The scenario at an international level is unstable. The Italian presidency has had to face the difficulties of relaunching growth, changing the European strategies, focusing on budgetary discipline. And now our vision is that there is another major objective that has been achieved. The presidency has proposed, and we believe achieved, a change in the economic paradigm which has been defining of our continental debate. Today, Europe does things differently, or if not, we will be left behind in a rapidly changing world. Growth, investment are at this point the two key words in the European debate. Thanks to the sponsorship of the presidency, we have been able to achieve a broad consensus on the new strategy, the new approach in the economic policies to be undertaken by the European Union. Growth continues to be weak, and this can only be achieved, further growth, if we combine measures that will have to launch simultaneously by all member states. Structural reforms, of course, support policies to public investments and private alike within the framework of the flexible monetary policy, always in respect of European discipline in the arena of budgetary discipline. Now, these being the conditions, Growth and investment are at this point at the very heart of the European debate. The program presented by the Juncker Commission focuses on an investment plan to foster growth, competitiveness, and job creation. The practical confirmation of this change is perceived in December in the Council, which started to understand what the path was to change as defined by Italy, and which has been achieved with a recent communication specifying that some investment expenses, in this case national voluntary contributions to the European Strategic Investment Fund, which is currently being built, may not be taken into account when we calculate those parameters of the Stability and Growth Pact. Thus, we would see a breath of fresh air to relaunch the economies of the member states. So what can we say about this past semester? What have been the key points? Well, the answer would be that for 6 months the presidency has worked with institutions to reinforce the role of the European Union on the international stage, from the Mediterranean all the way to the eastern borders. There has been a commitment to build a Europe that can foster peace and fundamental human rights, to improve the environment, to modernize our economies by means of new technologies, digital technologies, and innovation. Human rights and fundamental freedoms have also been very important during this past semester. In December, there was an approval of an ongoing dialogue between member states in the Council to safeguard the respect of human rights and democracy in the Union. We talk about the economy, but we have to remember that we are a union of freedoms and rights. Let me talk a little bit about some of these issues. I talked about the crisis before. Despite this context, which is difficult, the Italian presidency commits to achieving in a brief period of time very concrete results in some sectors which are especially close to the requests and hearts of European citizens. With an eye put on investment and growth, the ECOFIN in October agreed to launch a series of measures to foster investments in Europe. The Council underscored the importance of having institutional and financial rules that were innovative in order to further bolster the role of the European Investment Bank in order to ensure that this investment be truly efficacious. Another sector which is deemed to be prioritary for growth is the digital economy. 2 top-notch events have been devoted to this at the beginning and at the end of the semester. And remember, of course, the meeting that took place in September. In terms of legislation, the presidency has launched negotiations with the package called Connected Continent for the single telecommunications market and the directive regarding network safety. The presidency also has fostered active policies to create employment, especially youth employment, at a European level with a conference in Milan regarding employment, which was held in October. Again, here we address the issue of fighting unemployment, poverty, and social exclusion. Transparency and fighting tax evasion are very important issues when the time comes to study the budgetary realities. An agreement has been reached by the Council to avoid double taxation of dividends which are the result of financial hybrid constructs. Thus, we see the gap being closed, which so far allowed companies to take advantage of the loopholes that existed between and among different national legislation. But we have always focused on the importance of the real economy. The Italian presidency has achieved a systematic commitment in anything and everything that has to do with refocusing European actions towards the real economy, with the aim of increasing competitiveness, but also with the aim of fighting social inclusion, thinking about the importance that this has for the Union. In the semester, we also targeted microeconomic aspects of growth with the aim of systematically bringing on board the so-called industrial renaissance of all of the policies that have to do with competitiveness. This objective has been achieved by means of the establishment of a high-level group that studies competitiveness with a designated president and the aim of supporting the European institutions to foster competitiveness and growth, all the while guaranteeing continuity and consistency of the European policies which have to do with the real economy. We've also especially tried to ensure that the single market in Europe too was understood, as well as those that have to do with investments funds to foster long-term investments in the real economy. and the framework regarding legislation on intellectual property rights. Always focusing, of course, on the real economy, the presidency has reassessed the 2020 strategy with the aim of fostering the European economy with more intelligent growth in mind, more modern, more sustainable, and more solidary as well, establishing a link between the European semester and governance with a better adjustment between the real and the financial economies, fostering the capacity in terms of production of Europe, especially the small and medium-sized enterprises, which are absolutely essential for our countries especially. And this calls for a comprehensive approach to the industrial policy that will encourage SMEs, intellectual property, and assessment of quality of products. Also, important steps have been taken in regards to the creation of the banking union. As you know, the European Central Bank, together with the European authorities, have studied the status quo, analyzing the quality of assets and stress tests which European banks have been subject to under the supervision of the mechanism. The aim, of course, is to achieve an agreement on the execution of the contributions of the fund, which allow member states to certify this intergovernmental accord or agreement regarding transparency of contributions to the fund, which will ensure the launch of this instrument in January 2016. As to the environment and climate change, the presidency commits to finding an agreement within the new framework Climate Energy 2030 with the aim of arriving at a consensus on a very ambitious strategy which is appropriate and convenient that will allow us to think about long-term European objectives regarding all of the issues at hand, guaranteeing a balance struck between objectives, commitments, and costs. The agreement achieved just in October represents a success. We see a certification of European objectives vis-à-vis emissions reductions and renewable energies and increase of efficiency, energy efficiency. And then there's migration. Migration has definitely kept us busy. The presidency has developed active activity focusing on more contribution, focusing on migratory flows. One of the priorities has been to provide a response to the migratory pressures in a structured way, in a sustainable way, and from a European vantage point, going well beyond immediate emergency measures. We have thought of reinforcing borders and Frontex, cooperating with third countries, actions to be undertaken by member states, welcome, and taking of fingerprints. The Italian commitment has raised awareness regarding the fact that all of the external borders of the EU are a common border. This is a logical principle, but which was not clearly understood before these reports were prepared. And thus, Triton in the Mediterranean is the first line of action, an operation which is designed to protect the maritime borders at 30 miles from the Italian coastline are European borders, and thus Frontex exists. We cannot talk about migratory policies if we do not also take into account the external actions undertaken by the Union. The presidency guarantees political support to actions geared to provide more of a response and intervention of the Union in the different stages where our European neighbors live. The Italian request has put together in August a conference that focused on the Iraq crisis, which guaranteed support to those elements that tackle the Islamic State. The Italian policy also participates in the long-lasting Gaza and Libya activities and in other areas of the Middle East. And the summit, which took place in Milan in the month of October, we saw how this summit represented an outstanding occasion to provide a setting for European and Eastern countries to meet, as well as for conversations to ensue regarding the Ukraine. We've also studied international trade, especially in view of what it can contribute to European development. The Italian presidency has fostered an initiative to foster transparency for the negotiations regarding the European and North American agreement. We believe that if there is no transparency, European citizens will see more dangers than opportunities in this treaty, which is under consideration. So we believe that it was very important to ensure that this negotiation was carried out in a transparent manner. We believe that the results have been very important, and we believe also that Italy's commitment vis-à-vis the world and Europe goes well beyond the wrapping up of this semester. The capital of Rome is no longer going to be Rome, it's going to be Riga. I encourage you to visit Italy. The Universal Exhibition in Milan in 2015, which will deal with food, feeding the planet, changing the lives of humankind. Very important when we talk about food, sustainable agriculture, a healthy lifestyle, and fighting hunger. And to conclude now, I would like to repeat what President Renzi, who is a Florentine, said in his speech in Strasbourg just a month ago, to encourage us in our path towards Europe. We have a wonderful history behind us. We take inspiration from important principles. Dante has Ulysses say a sentence when his men, fearful, want to return home. You were not made to live as brutes. You were made to follow the path of virtue and knowledge. Thank you very much. Good day.
As far as I'm going to get on Spanish, I apologize, but I want to thank the Fundación Dumbriz for organizing this important conference and for the Italian presidency for all the achievements that they made during their term. I think it's fair to say that with the introduction of the Lisbon Treaty, we have a troika system of presidencies. That is, the Italian presidency, the Latvian presidency, and the Luxembourg presidency have united on the overall priorities of their presidencies. As a result, many of the things that Marco talked about, of course, will be continued on under our presidency, and I suspect also under the Luxembourg presidency. I have to say that I was intrigued by Miguel Otero's one-page sort of summary of the issues that we may be speaking about today. Quite frankly, I think that each of those issues warrants a separate conference. And I'm particularly, how should I say, I would be focused on the issue in the third paragraph, which is secular stagnation. I think that's an issue that we really have to seriously consider in the near future. But I won't go into that here. I'll try to be very short. The European Union, the Eurozone, is as strong as the individual states. Without strong individual states, there isn't a strong European Union. This fundamentally means that we each have to put our house in order. I think for the last several years, as the crisis has progressed, and as the European Union collectively here, each individual state has done what it can in order to in fact do that, to put their houses in order. This is important for the sake not just of individual states, but also collectively, because fundamentally we are all tied together in terms of how we solve the problems, and it's important that we recognize these interlinkages. When we don't, I'm afraid, going to get into the mess that we had during this crisis. We have to adopt national policies that bring fiscal and economic policy convergence among the member states. in order to avoid asymmetric shocks. We have a lot to learn from this crisis, and one of them is the need for convergence among all the different economic fiscal policies in the Union. At a fundamental level, this means that we have to adopt structural reforms to improve competitiveness, productivity, and our growth potential. I have to say that there has been some progress made on structural reforms in each of our countries. Latvia certainly had to do that after the 2009 crisis. But as you probably know, the European Union does assessments of how far we gotten each year. And they still encourage us to do it. And if you read the December report on post-program surveillance on Spain, they highlight the fact that Spain has made great progress, but still continue to ask for more. So this is something we still have to continue to do. And as you know, this means labor market and product market reforms. Especially, I think, in most countries now, the focus is on product market reforms and less on labor market reforms, since there's been progress in that area. At the same time, we have to align our individual fiscal and economic policies according to the rules set out in the Stability and Growth Pact, plus the Six-Pack and Two-Pack, again, to achieve policy convergence among member states. This is an important consideration. And as you probably know, the procedure where that takes place is something called the European semester, which is a year-long process of alignment which includes various monitoring and surveillance documents with respect to member state economic performance. And the idea is to make sure that there is this convergence. This is particularly important given the fact that the European Union, the Eurozone, is not an optimum currency area. And for the foreseeable future, it will probably not be an optimum currency area. Although there's discussion now about at least trying to achieve fiscal union. At the same time, I have to say that in the past, this European semester where we try to align our different economic and fiscal policies has not been all that successful since you've had reticence on the part of member states to implement country-specific recommendations, which leads not to convergence, but in fact to divergence. And this is something we have to be very careful about, because the more we diverge, the more likely we will get into a crisis situation where an asymmetric shock affects one country, and then you have contagion leading to crisis in other countries, as we saw during these last 4 years. So one of the priorities of the Latvian presidency is to streamline the European semester, the process by which we adopt collectively both economic and fiscal policies in alignment with each other. This is something that we will try to streamline in conjunction with the European Commission, again, with the idea of creating convergence. All member states have to converge toward a common threshold of structural reforms and fiscal stance. Such reforms create resiliency and flexibility in labor and product markets that more easily respond to asymmetric shocks, and create the conditions for increased competitiveness, productivity, and growth. At the same time, I think everybody is aware that during this crisis there has been a 15% on average drop in investment. With some countries less, some countries more, but on the whole 15% drop in investment that is holding back both growth and job creation. The reasons for this are varied, but certainly one of the critical ones is the lack of confidence on the part of households, banks, governments, and more importantly, firms. the expectations about the future are relatively low. And one of the jobs of all of us is to make sure that that confidence will rise in the future. In particular, the business community is looking for greater aggregate demand in our individual economies and collectively. And one of the ways to achieve a rise in aggregate demand is, in fact, to boost investment, particularly private investment. The ECB's quantitative easing should help, but is not sufficient. This is why the EC is creating the European Strategic Investment Fund, which will catalyze 315 billion euros over several years through public and private partnerships, investing in innovation, infrastructure, the digital economy, energy, and similar kind of in similar areas. The fund has to be operational by the summer, and Latvia is committed to ensuring that, in fact, the regulations and all the necessary preliminaries are in place by June of this year, so that money can go out the door in the summer. I have to say, if you think about it, this is a holistic approach to growth, where you're trying to do the fiscal, the monetary, and investment together. At the same time, there are various other EU funds, that's the so-called European Structural Investment Funds, that member states can utilize for investment. This is particularly critical for investing in SMEs and mid-cap companies. As you know, generally agree that the smaller companies are far more innovative than some of the larger ones. So it's important that the smaller companies are actively supported. There are also other elements on the EU agenda that have to be implemented to achieve synergies among the different initiatives and EU programs. This includes completing the single market, particularly in services, and Latvia has a particular interest in creating a single digital market to boost cross-border trade. There's also climate change that also can be important in terms of growth, particularly in terms of energy efficiency. Also creating an energy union is an important element in the priorities of the Latvian presidency, with a focus on interconnectivity. Also, I have to say there's a need to create a single capital market and to end fragmentation and create investment opportunities for all member states. Plus, there are other initiatives in transport, telecommunications, innovation, and research. And we can go on with the list that Marco indicated earlier. The whole idea is, I think, that we all have to do this, approach these issues holistically and in unison, alignment, et cetera, whatever words you want to use. I think we have to begin to think not so much in terms of individual policy silos, but in fact in this holistic, comprehensive way. And we have to, I think, make sure that the bureaucracy in Brussels doesn't keep to its very narrow point of, or focus on its very narrow areas. Because it's only by recognizing the interlinkages between all these different policy initiatives that we will, in fact, achieve the objectives we seek in terms of growth and competitiveness. When you look at the individual GDP growth under each of these various initiatives, it's usually some percentage under 1. But when you add all these individual percentages together, you have something quite significant. So it's important that we have this synergy between the various initiatives, and it's recognized that there is this need for synergy. And there are other initiatives in transport, telecommunications, in which I think I said that. And we also have to recognize that all these different initiatives and programs will require enormous investments over the coming years. So it is in fact very important that we raise the confidence in the business community and among households. We raise the increase the level of spending in investment in particular to achieve these results. The bottom line, I think, is we all have to get our houses in order to achieve economic convergence. We have to realize synergies by implementing initiatives to further growth through investment, and we need solidarity and political commitment as a fundamental starting point. That, in summary, is what I have to say. Thank you.